The heroic rescue. It was a normal day in the city, but everything changed in an instant. A loud explosion rocked the streets, sending dust and debris flying into the air. Cars were overturned, windows shattered, and chaos spread like wildfire. People screamed and ran in every direction, trying to escape the danger. Amidst the destruction, a man stood frozen, looking around, unsure of what to do. His name was Alex. He was just an ordinary man, not a soldier or a hero, just someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when the explosion hit, something inside him clicked. The panic of the moment faded and his instincts took over. Without thinking, he rushed toward the source of the explosion. As he navigated through the wreckage, Alex could hear the cries of people trapped beneath the rubble. The sound of metal and concrete shifting under the weight of destruction echoed around him. He couldn't save everyone, but he had to try. He kept moving, pushing past debris until he saw her. She was trapped under a pile of broken concrete, her legs pinned beneath a heavy beam. Her face was pale and her eyes fluttered open as he knelt beside her. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was shallow and she winced with pain every time she tried to move. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed the closest piece of metal he could find and began lifting the beam off her legs. It was heavy, much heavier than anything he'd ever lifted before, but he didn't stop. The woman groaned in pain, but she didn't speak. She looked at him with wide eyes as if she couldn't believe he was there. "Stay with me," Alex whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The woman's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Alex pushed harder, finally managing to free her from the rubble. She collapsed into his arms, barely able to hold herself up. "You're safe now," Alex said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. There was still danger everywhere. Explosions were still going off in the distance and sirens were wailing in the background. But in that moment he felt something powerful. He had saved her, and something about that felt like the beginning of something much bigger. He pulled her gently to her feet, supporting her weight as they stumbled through the wreckage. She didn't speak, but her eyes were focused on him, watching every move he made. It was as if she was studying him, trying to understand who he was and what he had done. "We need to get out of here," Alex said, looking around for a way to escape the danger zone. He spotted a narrow alley between two buildings and started guiding her toward it. They moved quickly, each step a battle against the pain in her legs and the uncertainty of the situation. As they made their way through the alley, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was something about this woman that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He had seen people in terrible conditions before, but she was different. There was a strange energy around her, something he couldn't explain. He glanced at her, noticing how calm she seemed despite everything that had just happened. Most people would have been panicking, but she was eerily still. She didn't even flinch as they passed through the broken streets and hidden dangers. It was as if she knew something he didn't. They finally reached a quiet part of the city, away from the worst of the destruction. Alex helped her sit down on a nearby bench, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why had she been in the middle of that explosion? And why did she look at him as if he was the most important person in the world? Before he could ask any of these questions, she looked up at him with those same wide eyes. There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. Alex stared at her in surprise. He hadn't expected her to speak at all, let alone thank him. But there was something in her tone that made him feel like her words were more than just gratitude. It was as if she was acknowledging something much deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. "You're welcome." The woman studied him for a moment longer, then slowly stood up, wincing from the pain in her legs. Alex offered his hand, but she didn't take it. Instead, she began to walk, each step slow and deliberate. "Where are you going?" Alex asked, following her. She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, meeting his gaze for the briefest of moments. "You'll see," she said cryptically, before turning back to the path ahead. Alex was left standing there, confused and uncertain. He had just saved her life, but he had no idea who she really was or what had brought her to that moment. All he knew was that his life had just changed in a way he couldn't explain, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like the answers were out there somewhere waiting for him to find them. But one thing was certain. This woman was not just a survivor of the explosion. She was something much more, something that would change his world forever. Unraveling the mystery, the city was still burning, its skyline obscured by smoke. But the danger felt less immediate now. Alex had done what he could to help the woman, but the chaos had not stopped. In fact, it seemed to grow. As the fire trucks and emergency vehicles filled the streets, people were left wondering who was responsible for the explosion and what it all meant. But there was something deeper, something far more unsettling, that Alex couldn't shake. After saving her from the wreckage, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman. He had no idea who she was, why she had been in the middle of the explosion, or even why she had looked at him with such intensity, like he was the only person in the world who mattered. His mind raced as he sat beside her on a secluded bench in the shadow of an abandoned building. The woman, despite her obvious injuries, sat perfectly still, her gaze distant. She was staring out across the horizon, her expression unreadable. The same strange energy that surrounded her earlier was still there, and it made Alex feel like he was caught in a whirlwind of confusion. "We need to talk," Alex said, breaking the silence. His voice was firm, though his hands were trembling. He had questions. So many questions, and they were building up inside him, begging to be answered. The woman turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. She didn't speak right away, which only made the tension between them grow. Alex swallowed, hard, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but he was beyond confused. "Who are you?" Alex finally asked. It was a simple question, but the weight behind it felt enormous. "Why were you in that explosion? Why are you here?" For a long moment she didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and gently touched his arm. Her fingers cold but precise, almost like she was searching for something inside him. It was a strange feeling, something like a deep connection, like she could see right through him. "I'm not from here," she said softly, her voice laced with an undeniable sadness. "This world, it's not my home." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, not your home? Where are you from?" The woman took a deep breath, as if trying to gather her thoughts. Her eyes flickered to the distant city, where smoke still curled into the sky. She could feel the vibrations of the earth beneath them, the pulse of the life around them, but it wasn't the same as what she had left behind. "I'm not human," she said quietly, her words almost drowned out by the noise of the city. And what just happened here was no accident. Alex felt his heart skip a beat. He had suspected something was off, but hearing it from her made it all too real. He sat up straighter, his gaze fixed on her. "What do you mean? The explosion? It wasn't just a random attack?" She shook her head, the weight of her words pressing down on them both. "It wasn't just an attack. It was a warning. And now they know you're involved." "They?" Alex repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Who are they?" The woman looked around cautiously as though ensuring no one was listening. Then, she leaned closer to him, her voice dropping even lower. "They are the ones who want to stop me. The ones who don't want anyone, especially humans, to interfere." Alex's mind raced. It was all so much to take in. A woman from another world, aliens targeting her, an explosion that was supposed to silence her, and somehow he was caught in the middle of it all. "Why me?" he asked, his voice cracking with confusion. "Why would they target me?" "I barely know you, because you saved me," she replied, her gaze piercing. "And that makes you part of something much bigger than either of us. You've crossed into a dangerous world now, Alex, and there's no turning back." He didn't know what to say. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. He had just wanted to help a stranger, but now it seemed his entire life had been turned upside down. "You're not from here," Alex repeated, trying to process everything she had said. "Where are you really from? And what is it that you're running from?" The woman hesitated, looking down at her hands. She seemed to be debating whether or not to trust him with the full truth. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but certain. "I come from a planet far from here. My people, we are not like humans. We are ancient, and we've been living in the shadows for centuries. We've watched over your world, but we've kept ourselves hidden. Until now." Alex stared at her, his mind reeling. "So, you're some kind of alien?" he asked, still struggling to believe it. She nodded slowly. "Yes, but there's more. I was sent here to prevent an intergalactic war, a war that could destroy both our worlds. But they found me before I could finish my mission, and now I have to stop them before it's too late." The woman's words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and Alex couldn't ignore the fear that was starting to settle in his chest. If what she said was true, then everything he had known about his world was a lie. Nothing was what it seemed. And worse yet, he was now involved in something that could affect the fate of not just Earth, but the entire universe. The woman looked at him, her expression filled with determination. "We don't have much time. We need to find the answers, and we need to do it fast. If they catch up with us again, it will be the end of everything." Alex's mind spun with all the new information, but there was no time to think. The explosion had just been the beginning, and now he was caught in a deadly game he didn't understand. The only thing he knew for sure was that the woman, this mysterious alien, had just become the most important person in his life. And for the first time in a long while, Alex felt fear. But it wasn't just for his own life. It was for everything he had ever known. And the worst part was that he didn't know if he was ready for what was coming next. A fateful decision. The silence between Alex and the woman, whom he still hadn't learned the name of, weighed heavily on both of them. They had spent the last few hours hidden away in a dark, deserted alley on the outskirts of the city, away from the eyes of anyone who might be looking for them. But the more they hid, the more Alex felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had always led a simple life. Nothing extraordinary. Just a mechanic trying to get by, doing honest work. He had never imagined that a single act of kindness would catapult him into a battle he didn't understand. And yet, here he was in the middle of an intergalactic conflict, hiding with an alien woman, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. The woman, whose name was still a mystery, had been quiet for a while now, staring at the ground, lost in her thoughts. She had told him about her mission, about how she had come to Earth to stop a war between alien factions. But there was so much she hadn't shared. He could tell she was holding back, and it only made him more desperate for answers. Why had she been sent? Who was trying to stop her, and why? "You said they were coming after you," Alex finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was shaky but firm. "Who are they? Who's behind this?" She looked up at him, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. It was as if she wanted to tell him everything but couldn't bring herself to. She opened her mouth to speak but then stopped, her eyes darting to the shadows around them. It was clear that whatever she had to say was dangerous for both of them. "I can't say too much yet," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "But you need to understand, Alex. This isn't just about me. It's about Earth, too. You've already been dragged into something far bigger than either of us." Alex clenched his fists. This wasn't what he had signed up for. He had simply helped a woman trapped under rubble. Now his life had spiraled into something unrecognizable. The thought of danger creeping closer made his heart race, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to stay by her side, no matter what. "I didn't ask for this," Alex said, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I didn't ask to be part of some alien war. I just want to know what's going on." The woman's expression softened, and she reached out to touch his arm, her fingers surprisingly warm despite her cold exterior. "I know," she said, her voice gentle yet urgent. "But you're already in it, whether you like it or not. We don't have a choice anymore." Alex felt a pang of fear shoot through him. He didn't know what to do. Everything around him was changing so fast, and he wasn't sure he was strong enough to keep up. He was just a man who had once lived a normal life. But now there was no going back. "What are we supposed to do now?" Alex asked, looking into her eyes for any sign of reassurance. But instead of comfort, he found a reflection of the same fear he was feeling. She didn't have the answers either. "We need to find the source of the threat," she said, her voice resolute. "They've infiltrated this world, and if we don't stop them soon, they'll bring destruction to everything you know." Alex's mind raced. Who was they? What exactly were they after? And how was he supposed to help her stop it? "What happens if we don't stop them?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. But the answer was clear in the woman's eyes. It wasn't just about stopping a war. It was about saving Earth from a fate worse than death. The woman stood up abruptly, her body tense as if she had sensed something in the air. Alex followed her lead, instinctively getting to his feet, his eyes scanning the street for any signs of danger. He could feel it, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end, a sense of something approaching, something inevitable. "They're coming," the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. "And we need to move now." Without another word, she turned and started walking down the narrow alleyway, her movements fluid and graceful. Alex didn't hesitate. He followed her, the questions still swirling in his mind. But there was no time to ask. He could feel it now, too, the presence of danger in the air. Something was out there, something that would change everything. They moved quickly, weaving through abandoned streets and dark corners, staying out of sight. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was a strange sensation, like eyes were following them, always just out of reach. His heart pounded in his chest as they took another turn into a more deserted part of the city. "Where are we going?" Alex asked, trying to keep up with her brisk pace. "What's the plan?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She paused for a moment, her head tilted as if listening for something. Then, without warning, she turned sharply to the right, toward a dark alley that Alex hadn't noticed before. She motioned for him to follow. "We need to get to a safe house," she said, her voice grim. "There's someone there who can help us, but we have to hurry." Alex had no idea who she was talking about, but he wasn't about to question her now. They had to keep moving. The atmosphere around them was thick with tension, every step they took echoing loudly in the empty streets. And then, just as they reached the entrance to the alley, Alex heard it. A sound, barely audible at first but growing louder with each passing second. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. "They're here," the woman said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her eyes. "Run." Without waiting for another word, they both sprinted down the alley, the footsteps growing closer. Alex's breath came in short bursts as they rounded the corner. His heart raced, his mind screaming for them to get to safety. But every turn they made seemed to bring them closer to the danger they were running from. And then at the end of the alley, Alex saw it, an old abandoned building with a single light flickering in the window. The safe house. They made it just in time. The door slammed shut behind them as they collapsed against the wall, panting heavily, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The woman looked at him, her expression grave. "They've found us," she said, her voice quiet but filled with determination. "And now, there's no turning back." Alex knew she was right. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye. And now, the real fight was just beginning. The ticking clock, the dimly lit safe house was their last refuge. As the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them away from the outside world, Alex's pulse hammered in his chest. The room was small, the walls lined with old wooden shelves, filled with dusty books and strange trinkets that seemed out of place in a city so near collapse. The only sound that filled the space was their heavy breathing, punctuated by the occasional distant echo of sirens or explosions from the outside world. It was the calm before the storm. They had made it here, but Alex could sense the unease in the woman, who, despite everything, had not given him her name. Her posture was stiff, her eyes darting to every corner of the room, every crack in the walls. She was on edge, and it wasn't hard to see why. There were forces closing in on them, and time was running out. "How long do we have?" Alex asked, his voice rough with exhaustion and fear. The adrenaline of the chase was wearing off, but the tension still clung to him like a second skin. He needed answers, but more than that, he needed to know what to do next. The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment it felt like the entire room held its breath. Then she spoke, her voice low and steady. "Not long." Alex's stomach tightened. "What does that mean? How much time do we have?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she moved to the small table in the corner and began to sift through the papers and objects strewn across it. Alex could see that she was trying to focus, but it was clear that her mind was somewhere else. Her gaze kept drifting to the window, to the street outside, as if she could sense the danger creeping closer with every passing second. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "They know we're here. They've been tracking us since the explosion. We're not safe here for long." Alex felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. "Who are they? You've been talking about them for hours now. Who the hell are these people, and why are they trying to kill you?" The woman's face darkened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of something more than fear in her eyes. Anger. Raw, intense anger, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resignation. "They're not human," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "and they won't stop until I'm dead." "What do they want from you?" Alex asked, his frustration growing. He had to know more. He had to understand the stakes because he had a feeling that his life, and the fate of everything he knew, was hanging by a thread. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the papers in front of her. "They're an ancient race. They've been around long before humans ever stepped foot on this planet. They were once the rulers of the galaxy, but they've been in hiding for centuries, waiting for the right moment to return, and that moment is now." Alex's mind was spinning. "So what, you're some kind of alien princess or something?" The woman shot him a sharp look, but there was a strange sadness behind her eyes. "Something like that. But that's not the important part. What matters is that they know what I'm capable of, and they'll stop at nothing to silence me before I can complete my mission." Alex took a step toward her, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. "What mission? What are you trying to do? Why can't they just let you finish whatever it is you came here to do?" Her gaze softened, and she looked away for a moment as if trying to gather the strength to continue. "I came to stop an intergalactic war. A war that will destroy not just my people, but yours as well. The factions I've been sent to warn are already preparing for it, and if I don't act quickly, everything will be lost." "So they're after you because you're trying to stop a war?" Alex asked, trying to wrap his mind around it. "Why don't you just leave, go back to wherever you came from and warn them? Why do they need you here?" She shook her head, her eyes now filled with a quiet sorrow. "Because I'm the only one who can stop it, and they know that. They've been watching me for years, waiting for the moment when I would be vulnerable enough for them to strike. They've been waiting for this moment for me to get close to Earth and expose the truth. But why me?" Alex's voice was barely a whisper now, the weight of his involvement sinking in deeper. "Why did they come after me? I'm just a mechanic, a regular guy." The woman stared at him for a long time, as if weighing whether or not to tell him the full truth. Finally she spoke, her voice heavy with the burden of secrets. "Because you saved me. By saving me, you've become part of this. You're now a part of something bigger than both of us. You're a target now, Alex, and they won't stop coming after us until we're both dead." The room seemed to grow colder as her words settled over him. He had known that his life had changed since the moment he pulled her from the wreckage, but hearing her say it so plainly made it all feel far more real. He was no longer just a bystander. He was part of something dangerous, something that could destroy everything he knew. But the woman's words also filled him with a strange sense of purpose. He couldn't just walk away from this, no matter how much he wanted to. She was right. He had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. "So what now?" he asked, trying to steady his breath. How do we stop them? How do we stop a war before it starts? The woman's eyes locked with his, and for the first time, he saw something in her gaze that made him believe they could do this. Together. We find the source. We uncover who's really behind all of this, and we stop them before they can launch the war. We need to get to the heart of the conspiracy, and that's not going to be easy, but it's the only way. Before Alex could respond, the woman's eyes flicked to the window, her posture tensing once more. They're close. Too close. We don't have much time. Alex felt the adrenaline surge through his veins again. This was it. The ticking clock had started, and they had to move fast. The war wasn't just on the horizon anymore. It was already knocking at their door. Let's go, Alex said, determination flooding his voice. Whatever it takes, we'll stop them. The woman nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Good, because the real fight is just beginning. And with that, they left the safe house, stepping into the unknown, ready to face whatever was waiting for them. The unlikely alliance. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the city. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. Alex and the woman, still nameless to him, but now undeniably intertwined in his fate, moved quickly through the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the thick night air. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every corner they turned, every alley they entered, felt like a calculated risk. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. We need to find them before they find us, the woman said, her voice sharp, though it carried an edge of frustration that Alex hadn't heard from her before. She had been distant lately, not sharing the full extent of her knowledge, and it was starting to wear on him. With every passing hour, he could feel the pressure mounting, not just from the danger surrounding them, but from the weight of the truth that she had yet to reveal. But there was no time to dwell on it now. Alex had grown used to the constant feeling of being hunted. His life had become a series of close calls and near misses, but this was different. He had crossed into a world far beyond anything he could have ever imagined. There were factions at play, ancient enemies, and now it seemed a new player had entered the game. A player who might just change everything. "Who are we looking for?" Alex asked, his eyes scanning the street for any sign of danger. "You mentioned someone who could help us." "But who?" The woman's gaze flickered to him for a moment, and then she looked away, her expression guarded. "Someone I used to trust," she said slowly. "Someone who owes me a debt. But after everything that's happened, I'm not sure if he'll help us. He's complicated." "Complicated how?" Alex pressed. The tension between them was thick, like an invisible wall, and the uncertainty in her voice made him nervous. He didn't like this. He didn't like feeling like he was being kept in the dark, especially not when everything around them seemed to be spiraling out of control. "He's not just anyone. He's a leader of a faction," she said, her voice barely audible. "One of the oldest factions. They've been in hiding just like me, but they don't share my ideals. They're power-hungry, and they'll do anything to get what they want." Alex stopped walking, his mind racing. A leader of an ancient faction? "So he's like your enemy?" The woman hesitated before answering. "Not exactly, but he's dangerous. He's not someone you can trust blindly, even if he does owe me. If we're going to stop what's coming, we need his help. But he won't give it easily." Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. He had trusted this woman, had risked everything to save her, and now she was telling him that the person who could help them might just be their biggest threat. It was like the world was playing a cruel game, and the rules kept changing. "So, what do we do? Just walk up to him and hope he helps us?" Alex's voice was laced with sarcasm, but deep down, he knew that the woman was right. They had no other choice. She didn't answer immediately, her eyes lost in thought. But then she turned to him, her expression hardening. "Yes, we don't have a choice. If we want to stop this war, we have to convince him. And that's not going to be easy." Alex nodded, but inside doubts were beginning to surface. This wasn't a simple fight. There were too many players, too many secrets. And worst of all, There were too many unknowns. The ticking clock had already started, and they were running out of time. The streets were quieter now, and the further they walked, the more Alex began to feel the weight of the night closing in around them. It wasn't just the silence, it was the feeling of being watched, of invisible eyes following their every move. He glanced over his shoulder, but there was nothing. Nothing but shadows. "He's close," the woman said suddenly, her voice low, tense. "I can feel it." They were standing at the edge of an abandoned lot now. The ground cracked and uneven, the air thick with the scent of decay. Alex felt his heart race. This was it. The place where they would either find the answers they needed or walk right into a trap. "This is it?" Alex asked, eyeing the dark building in front of them. It looked like an old warehouse, long abandoned. There were no lights on inside, and the door appeared to be bolted shut. "He's here," the woman said. Her eyes narrowed as she approached the building. "He's always here when the world needs to be hidden. Trust me. If he's still alive, this is where we'll find him." Alex followed her warily, his senses heightened, every instinct telling him that something wasn't right. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap, but there was no going back now. They had no other option. She reached the door and knocked 3 times. Alex stood back, watching her closely. After a long moment, the door creaked open, revealing a figure standing in the shadows. He was tall, his features obscured by the dim light. But Alex could tell immediately that this was no ordinary man. There was something in his posture, the way he moved, that made him stand out. The woman stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We need your help." The man in the doorway didn't speak at first. He just studied her for a moment, as if weighing the situation. Then, he glanced at Alex, his gaze cold and calculating. "You brought him with you?" the man asked, his voice deep, almost reverberating in the still air. The woman nodded. "He's part of this now, whether you like it or not." The man smirked, but there was no humor in his expression. "You've always been full of surprises," he said, stepping aside to let them in. "Come in then. But know this, if you're wasting my time, you won't leave here alive." Alex felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside, the heavy door closing behind them with a finality that echoed in the dark. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and rust. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb overhead. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this place had been untouched for years, and yet the man who stood before them seemed to be perfectly at home here. "I'm assuming you've come to bargain," the man said, his eyes scanning them both. "But I don't give my help easily. So what do you want?" The woman stepped forward, her face expressionless. "We need you to help us stop the war. We can't do this without you." The man's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "A war, huh?" he murmured, as if considering the weight of her words. "And why should I help you? After everything that's happened, I have nothing to gain." Alex could feel the tension rising in the room. The man was playing a game, testing them, and the stakes were higher than ever. "Because if you don't help us," the woman said, her voice cold now, "there won't be a future for any of us." For a moment, the man said nothing. Then slowly, he stepped back, gesturing for them to enter further into the building. "Fine," he said, "but this isn't going to be easy, and you'd better be ready for whatever comes next." As they stepped deeper into the shadows of the warehouse, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. They had found the ally they needed, but at what cost? In the world they were entering, no one could be trusted, not even those who claimed to be on their side. And with every step they took, the war seemed closer, its dark grip tightening around them. The real fight, Alex realized, had only just begun. The battle for the future. The city had become a war zone. The distant hum of sirens had long since faded, replaced by the roar of explosions and the distant cries of people caught in the chaos. Alex stood in the shadows of an abandoned building, watching the chaos unfold before him. The world was unraveling, and it felt like there was nothing they could do to stop it. The man they had come to for help, an ancient leader of a faction as dangerous as it was elusive, had proven to be their most unpredictable ally. His words rang in Alex's ears as they prepared for the next stage of their mission. "There's no turning back now," the man had said. "This isn't about just stopping a war anymore. It's about deciding whether humanity gets to have a future." Those words had haunted Alex as they planned their next move. The stakes had grown far higher than anyone had expected. What had started as a rescue mission had now evolved into a fight for survival, not just for him and the woman, but for the future of the entire planet. The war they were trying to prevent was not just a conflict between factions. It was a battle for the very soul of humanity. As the woman moved through the building with the same intensity she had shown since their first meeting, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. They had gathered intel from the man, the leader of the faction, about the enemy's next move. It was worse than they had thought. The enemy wasn't just a group of ruthless conquerors. They were methodical, calculating, and had infiltrated nearly every level of power on Earth. There were agents everywhere, and if they didn't act fast, it would be too late to stop the catastrophe they were heading toward. "We can't wait any longer," Alex said, his voice tense as he looked out from their vantage point at the army, amassing in the distance. Hundreds of soldiers, their uniforms dark and foreboding, were preparing to launch an assault on the city. It was clear now. The final battle was coming, and if they didn't stop it, humanity's future would be sealed by forces far beyond their control. "I know," the woman replied, her voice cool but filled with resolve. "We have one chance to stop them, and it's now or never." Alex turned toward her. "You've been saying that since we started this. Every time we move, you say we're running out of time. How much longer do we have?" She looked at him, her eyes piercing through the dim light of the room. "Long enough to either save the world or destroy it." The words hit him hard, their weight pressing down on him. For all his confusion, all his uncertainty, there was no denying the gravity of what was at stake. His world, his simple, unassuming life, had been ripped apart the moment he had pulled her from the wreckage. Now, it was all leading to this. The moment where his decisions would determine not just his fate, but the fate of every living thing on Earth. They couldn't afford to fail. The tension in the air was suffocating as they made their way through the abandoned city. They had to move fast. The enemy had eyes everywhere, and their time was running out. Every corner they turned felt like a trap, every shadow a potential threat. They couldn't risk making a wrong move. "We need to infiltrate their headquarters," the woman said as they neared their destination. "Once we're inside, we can disable their communications. Without that, they'll be forced to act blindly. It'll give us the edge we need." Alex nodded, his mind already racing with the logistics of it all. He wasn't a soldier. Hell, he wasn't even a fighter. He was just a mechanic who had gotten caught up in something far bigger than himself. And yet, here he was, standing, on the precipice of a battle that would decide everything. "How do we get in?" Alex asked, his voice low. The woman gave him a hard look, her eyes steely with determination. "We break in." It sounded simple enough, but Alex knew better than to take her words at face value. Breaking into a highly secured facility wasn't as easy as it sounded. And the stakes? If they failed, there was no second chance. They had planned it down to the smallest detail. But as they neared the entrance to the enemy's headquarters, something didn't feel right. The air seemed thicker, the atmosphere charged with an electric sense of impending danger. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking right into a trap. "We're close," the woman murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the city. "Stay close." They moved like shadows, slipping through the darkened streets, their movements fluid and calculated. As they neared the entrance to the building, Alex felt his heart thud in his chest. They had no idea what was waiting for them inside, but one thing was certain. They were about to find out. The door to the headquarters was a heavy, reinforced steel structure, designed to withstand any intrusion. But the woman didn't hesitate. With a few deft movements, she disabled the security system, and the door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior. They slipped inside, moving silently through the corridors, their footsteps barely a whisper on the cold metal floor. Alex's breath quickened, his pulse pounding in his ears. Every instinct told him to turn back, to run, but there was no time for that now. They had come too far. "We need to split up." the woman whispered as they reached a large central room filled with blinking monitors and humming machinery. You go left, I'll go right. Alex didn't argue. They had no choice but to trust each other completely. He turned and moved to the left, careful to avoid the surveillance cameras that dotted the room. The enemy was organized, but so were they. Their plan was simple: disable the communications network, shut down the enemy's operations, and leave before they could be caught. But as Alex worked, something caught his eye. A figure in the shadows, barely visible, moving toward him. He froze, his heart racing. This wasn't part of the plan. The woman was still on the other side of the room, but she hadn't seen the approaching figure yet. Alex's hand moved instinctively to the small weapon he had been given, a small, lightweight gun that he barely knew how to use. The figure came closer, their face obscured by a hood. Alex's grip tightened on the gun as he prepared to defend himself, but before he could make a move, the figure stopped. You're making a mistake, the figure said in a low voice, their words almost drowned out by the humming machines around them. Alex's blood ran cold. He recognized that voice. It was the man who had helped them, the one who had given them the intel they needed to get here. What are you doing here? Alex asked, confusion and anger rising in his chest. You said you were helping us. The man's expression was unreadable. I never said I was on your side. I only said I would give you the tools to fight. But you're playing a dangerous game, Alex, and you've already lost. The woman's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. Get away from him, she shouted, and in an instant, she was at Alex's side, her eyes locked on the man. He's one of them, the woman said, her voice filled with disgust. He's been playing both sides from the beginning, and now he's here to stop us. Alex's heart sank. The man they had trusted, the man they had risked everything for, had been a traitor all along, and in that moment Alex knew that this fight, this war, was about to take a darker turn. A new beginning. The world was on fire. The skies above the city were streaked with smoke, and the streets, once bustling with the everyday noise of human life, were now filled with the haunting sounds of destruction. Explosions reverberated through the air, shaking the very foundations of the earth. Alex could feel the weight of it all, the weight of the fight he had found himself in, the weight of the choices he had made. It was all culminating in this moment. He stood at the edge of the battlefield, staring out over the destruction. The enemy, those who had come to claim Earth as their own, were retreating, but not without leaving their mark. The woman, who he now knew was so much more than just a survivor, stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. She was calm, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil she was feeling. This wasn't the end. This wasn't the victory they had hoped for. It was just the beginning. You did it, she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind that swept across the ruined city. We stopped them. For now. Alex didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. The weight of the battle, the uncertainty of the future, it was too much to bear. They had won the fight, but at what cost? So many lives had been lost, so many cities had been destroyed. The world they knew was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable, something scarred by the war that had nearly torn it apart. He looked at her, searching her face for some sign that everything would be okay. But there was no reassurance, no promise of peace. Just a woman who had come to Earth with a mission that had nearly cost her everything. But how long will this last? Alex asked, his voice hoarse. How long before they come back? The woman's eyes darkened, the familiar sadness creeping back into her gaze. They will come back, but not in the same way. They'll regroup, rebuild, they won't give up, and neither can we. Alex's heart sank. He had known it wasn't over. They had won a battle, not the war. But knowing it and accepting it were two different things. The woman was right, though. They couldn't rest. Not yet. There was still so much to do, so much at stake. The war had changed the world, but the fight for its future was just beginning. So what now? Alex asked, his words filled with uncertainty. Where do we go from here? The woman didn't hesitate. We rebuild, we protect what we have left, and we find those who are still out there, hiding, waiting. We unite the survivors. We create a new world, a better world. Is it even possible? Alex asked, the question hanging in the air. After everything, can we really make something better out of the ashes? She turned to face him, her expression intense but with a hint of something softer, a flicker of hope. It has to be, because if we don't, everything we fought for, everything we lost, will be for nothing. We have to believe it's possible, or the war was never worth fighting. Alex nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. They couldn't afford to lose hope. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. They had fought for this moment, for the chance to rebuild, to forge a new future, and even though it seemed impossible, even though the world had been torn apart in ways they couldn't fully comprehend, there was one thing he knew for sure. They couldn't stop fighting. As they made their way through the city, passing the remnants of the battle, Alex couldn't help but notice the change in the air. It was still heavy, filled with the echoes of war, but there was something else now, something that had been absent for so long. It was the quiet, almost imperceptible sense of survival, the feeling that life, despite everything, was beginning to emerge from the wreckage. They reached a small group of survivors huddled together in the ruins of an old building. Some were injured, others were exhausted, but all of them were alive, and that in itself was a victory. The woman stepped forward, her presence commanding yet comforting, and the group fell silent, looking to her for direction. "We're going to rebuild," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "We're going to rise from this, together, and we're going to make sure that what happened here never happens again." Alex stood back, watching her as she spoke. He had never seen her like this before. Not just a survivor, not just a warrior, but a leader. In that moment, he realized something that he hadn't fully understood until now. The woman he had helped save wasn't just someone running from the past. She was someone forging a future that needed him, needed all of them to be a part of it. As the survivors began to gather around her, their faces filled with cautious optimism, Alex felt a sense of determination fill him as well. They had all been through hell, but they had survived, and together they could build something new, a world that wasn't defined by war and destruction, but by hope and resilience. "What now?" Alex asked, his voice steady. The woman turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "Now we move forward. We unite what's left. We find the ones who are still out there, and we start the long, hard work of rebuilding this world." Alex looked around at the survivors, at the broken city, and he realized something important. They were all part of something bigger than themselves, something that could survive, rebuild, and ultimately thrive. The war had changed everything, but it had also given them the chance to build a new future from the ruins of the old one. "Then let's get started," Alex said, his voice resolute. The woman nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Together. And as they stood there, surrounded by the ashes of the old world, Alex felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A glimmer of hope. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But they had survived. And for the first time since everything had started, it felt like they had a chance. They had a chance to rebuild, to create a new world. And with that chance, they would fight for a future, one where humanity could rise again, stronger than ever before. The journey was far from over. But this time Alex knew they weren't alone, Umini.